Hey everybody, Dave here at Ground Zero, helping you through your period of isolation. So how's everybody doing out there? If you got something in particular going on, put it in our comments. Put it in the comments on our Facebook link to this video, or put it on the YouTube comments. Either way, we want to hear from you. We're helping you through it with a segment we're still calling Interestingly Enough. Now, I asked people for suggestions, things they wanted me to talk about, wind me up, watch me go, and I get this note from Victoria Lane Siegler. Nice name. And it says, very simply enough, I would love a video about Hawkman. Wow, Victoria has no idea what she's doing to me, because there is no superhero with a more convoluted, torturous history than Hawkman. But Victoria is my daughter-in-law, so we're going to give it a go. Now, it's a pretty windy, wibbly-wobbly road, so if you feel like your head's about to explode, just hit pause in the video and then come back to us. We'll wait for you. Now, the story of Hawkman is going to begin with Gardner Fox. Now, Gardner Fox was one of the most prolific, creative, and important writers in all of comics history. And here I bet you thought it was Stan Lee. But no, Gardner Fox is reported to have written over 4,000 comic book stories, and he created a host of comic book characters that are mainstays today. We're talking The Flash, we're talking Dr. Fate, the Justice Society of America, and then ultimately the Justice League of America, Adam Strange. He created Zatanna for the Justice League. He created so many heroes and a lot of concepts that are core today, like the whole concept of the DC multiverse. That goes back to Gardner Fox. Now, I'm going to go back just a touch before him to a guy by the name of W.C. Gaines. Now, W.C. Gaines was working at a newspaper syndicate when a property submission came over his desk from two young creators by the name of Siegel and Schuster. They couldn't use it, but he turned his buddies over at DC Comics, Harry Donenfeld and Jack Leibowitz, and said, you might be able to use this. They published it in the first issue of Action, and Superman started the whole golden age of comics and really spawned an entire industry. Now, W.C. Gaines saw just how successful Superman was and thought to himself, hey, I'm getting in on this. I'm going to create a comic book company myself. So he created All American Comics. Now, All American Comics served as a sister publication to DC Comics. They shared the same distributor. They shared printers. They actually advertised each other's comics in their books. But they had separate editorial offices. DC was uptown. They had carpet. All American was downtown. No carpet. So, by all accounts, W.C. Gaines was a grumpy, business-like guy, and he focused solely on the business end of this new company and left all the editorial and the creative end to Sheldon Mayer. It was Sheldon Mayer that approached Gardner Fox because they were working on a comic book that was going to be nothing but superheroes, and he wanted him to create the lead feature for Flash Comics. Gardner Fox then created The Flash. The rest already is history. But they went back to him and said, we need another feature for that book. And it was then that Gardner Fox, along with Dennis Neville, created Hawkman. Now, Hawkman, as he was originally done, was archaeologist Carter Hall. Remember that, and remember the spelling. It comes to matter. Carter Hall collected ancient weapons. He had no idea why, but for whatever reason, he was fascinated with ancient weapons. So he gets a package in the mail of a glass knife. Doesn't know what it is, but when he touches it, he suddenly realizes he is a reincarnated Egyptian prince by the name of Khufu. Now, in actuality, Khufu really was an Egyptian monarch. About 26th century BC, it is reported that he was the guy that commissioned the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world for you trivia buffs out there. Anyway, so back to Carter Hall. He realizes he's this reincarnated Egyptian prince. He also realized he was killed with that very glass knife by his arch nemesis, Hathset. And he also realized Hathset killed his beautiful lady love by the name of Shiera. Now, of course, wouldn't it be great if Shiera was reincarnated too? Of course it would. And she was. And Carter Hall runs into her on page 5. Comics moved really, really fast back in those days. So he meets Shiera and realizes, you're the reincarnation of my lady love, and I'm the reincarnation of the Egyptian prince. You know, if we're both reincarnated, probably our arch nemesis is reincarnated too. So he goes back and decides to become Hawkman that very, very day. Luckily for him, he had discovered ninth metal. Ninth metal was an anti-gravity metal that allowed him to float up in the air, so combining that with these big, giant, cumbersome, bulky wings, he could fly. And then, since he happened to have an arsenal of ancient weapons, he could use those and fight crime as Hawkman. Well, of course, they run into Hasset because, yes, Hasset was reincarnated as well. They fight and defeat him more than once. Shira herself becomes Hawkgirl because it was less enlightened times. And both of them joined the Justice Society of America. Now, the Justice Society of America was also created by Gardner Fox and was the very first superhero team, paving the way for all superhero teams to follow the Justice League, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Captain Carrot and his amazing zoo crew, all came from what was first formed in the Justice Society of America. So far, the story's pretty straightforward. I can handle it, you can handle it, nobody's head is exploded, that's a good thing. Then we get to 1961. Now, in 1961, most of these characters had ceased publication at one point or another. But Julius Schwartz was busy recreating new, more modern versions of all of these characters. He redid The Flash. He created a new version of Green Lantern, a new version of the Atom, even a new version of the Justice Society of America, which he called the Justice League of America, also written by Gardner Fox. So now it's time to turn his attention to Hawkman. And he got artist Joe Kubert to work with Gardner Fox in an issue of Brave and the Bold in 1961. Now, they basically kept the name, but they completely redid everything else. In this particular version, it's Katir Hall with a K, and he's a space policeman from the planet Thanagar. They arrive in a giant spaceship in Earth because they're pursuing the shape-changing space villain Bith. They fight Bith. They finally take care of him, but they're here and they think, Earth is so much fun, we're just going to stay here and fight crime. So they alter the names just a bit to the more Earth-like Carter Hall and Shira Saunders, and they get jobs at a museum. And the rest is still probably history, and honestly, it's a change, but my head's still not exploding. Later that year, however, Gardner Fox wrote a story in Flash called The Flash of Two Worlds. In this, he introduced the concept of the multiverse. All those characters from the Golden Age that had at that point ceased publication, they existed just in a different universe. And the regular DC Universe Now heroes could occasionally travel over there and meet them. Well, that left Jay Garrick as the Flash of the other universe. That left Alan Scott as the Green Lantern of that universe. So there was not a conflict with Barry Allen and Hal Jordan. But Carter Hall, he's Carter Hall in both universes. So already things are starting to get a little problematic. Well, they leave Carter Hall as the Egyptian prince and in the Justice Society. Things are still okay, even though there's now two Carter Hall Hawkmans. Then it starts to get weird. When you get to the 1980s, fantastic artist Tim Truman ran into Gardner Fox at a comic convention and said to him, "Hey, I got a great idea. Are you interested? How about if we make a much more fantasy, gritty science fiction version of Hawkman and redo it in a prestige format with me doing the art? It'll be really cool." Gardner Fox was really intrigued, and he's definitely signed off on the idea and said, when you get to that point, let me know. Tim Truman got busy with his Scout series, and so it was a little while before he actually got to it, and unfortunately, by the time he got to it, Gardner Fox had sadly passed away. But Tim Truman dived in with both feet and created Hawkworld. Now, Hawkworld is an excellent series. Dig it out of back issue bins. You'll thoroughly enjoy it. It's very 80s. It's very dark. It's very gritty. Tim Truman's art is excellent, but it reestablishes a slightly different continuity, reintroducing Carter Hall in Thanagar. This was followed by a regular monthly Hawkworld series written by John Ostrander, also very good. But here's the problem. It takes place in real-time continuity. Regular continuity in the 1980s. Here's Carter Hall from Thanagar coming to Earth. Uh-oh, what are we going to do with the other Carter Hall that's been running around for the past 20 years? Well, there is no continuity wound so deep that DC can't throw a really tiny Band-Aid on it. So what they did was they said, that Carter Hall that had been running around all this time, 2 decades worth of comics, was actually a dark Thanagarian agent by the name of Fel Andar. He came to Earth and instead of being Fel Andar, assumed the identity of Carter Hall. Not only that, he married an Earth woman, had her brain wiped so that she believed she was Hawkwoman. Yeah, totally. Fine. Yeah, I know. It made no sense. It's a mess. Already we're off the deep end and it's going crazy. And it gets worse, because then we get to 0 Hour. In 0 Hour, they knew they had a continuity mess. And so instead of a small Band-Aid, they ripped it off and poured Lysol on it. And we get both versions of Hawkman. They combine them into this character called Hawk God, who immediately goes insane, probably trying to figure out his own continuity, and then disappears supposedly for good. At that point, nobody wanted to touch Hawkman. There was too much of a mess. Reconciling it with the new post-crisis continuity was just too big a task, so no more Hawkman. They even introduced Zariel, another character that was a winged character for the Justice League of America. He never took off, though. Okay, so then we get to Geoff Johns. Geoff Johns, before he was quite the superstar writer he is today, was earning basically his merit on the Justice Society of America comic, doing a fantastic job. I highly recommend this series. But in it, he had a girl by the name of Kendra Saunders. At this point, they're not even trying with the names. Anyway, Kendra Saunders is Hawk Girl. What she fights and struggles with is she or is she not really the reincarnation of Shara Saunders? Yes, she is. Finally, she gives in. Everybody gives in. Everybody knew what was coming. And so sure enough, what is coming is the return of Hawkman. Now, this was actually handled pretty well. What they did was they brought Carter Hall back in a younger body, and he had all the memories of all his past lives. So they kind of reconciled him by saying everybody was all part of the kind of twisty, wobbly continuity. And hey, here it is, deal with it. It's all part of one thing. And that was fine. That led to a regular Hawkman miniseries written by Geoff Johns. Again, highly recommended. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't great. But it did put a reasonable Band-Aid on the continuity and started to kind of heal things. Well, DC being DC, they can't leave well enough alone. So once the new 52 hit, we get Savage Hawkman. Savage Hawkman discards everything we'd known before and reintroduces the Thanagarian Carter Hall. And it's awful. And it makes no sense. And everybody's confused. And at this point, what are we ever possibly going to do? At this point now, finally, they mercifully put us out of our misery with the death of Hawkman. Now, death of Hawkman was a pretty good idea at this point. We were kind of ready to put us out of our misery, but that takes care of the Savage Hawkman version of Hawkman. And that brings us up to present day, because Robert Venditti comes out then with a new series called Hawkman. And at this point, Hawkman has all of these past lives. In fact, he doesn't just go back to Egyptian times. He goes back even further than that. He's got more lives than a whole room full of cats. And every one of them he remembers, but only in fragments of his memory. This series actually is really good, and it's still going today, and we don't entirely know where it's going to end up. But that brings us up largely to present. It's a twisty, wobbly, turny kind of path. But hey, here we are. Now they're playing up the mystery of just exactly how many of these lives are real. How many people has he been over time? It's a good concept, and it works pretty well. And frankly, Michael really loves it. So, if you want to get into Hawkman, what should you read? You can go back and buy the Golden Age Hawkman. It's actually very solid. As Golden Age stories go, it's pretty fun, makes sense. The Silver Age Hawkman is also pretty good. You'll have to buy the expensive archives. That's about the only way they're available. They're very Silver Age-ish, and they're Gardner Fox stories, but also very creative, good stories, lots of interesting things going on. But really, probably the place for modern readers to start is Geoff Johns' work. His run on JSA is highly, highly recommended. Buy this book. It was a great book, and it's what made Geoff Johns a superstar writer. Follow that up with Geoff Johns' run on Hawkman. Also, a really good run of comics. Solid, largely made sense, with a few hiccups here and there that they did the best they could with. And then after you've read all those, then you're ready for Robert Venditti's run. And it's a solid run of books. It's still ongoing, so there's not a lot of trades out for this one, but there it is. And that brings us up to present and gets you sort of caught up on Hawkman. I actually skipped over a few things because there's just too much to even really go in. Hopefully the swelling has subsided and your head's coming back to normal. Now, before I close, I'm going to remind everybody, Guys, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. At this point, I'm having trouble putting these on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us some likes. Dave needs affirmation here, okay? Also, share the videos. Get them out there. You know, the more we can get these out, the better everybody will be. And did I mention Dave needs affirmation? Guys, that's all I've got for you today. Again, the comments are there for a reason. Whether you do them on our Facebook page or whether you do them on YouTube, talk to us. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us what you're reading. Tell us what you're enjoying. Tell us what you think you want me to talk about. Either way, guys, I've got to go bone up on the history of Fawcett and Charlton comics because that also is probably going to make somebody's head explode. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Guys, have a great day. And remember, wash your hands. Stay at home if you can. Take care, guys.